excuse us for a second.
Oh, wow. So amazing to see you all. And my dad would be so touched by each and every one of you being here. And that the room is pretty full also. He would like that, I think. He's just really prepared us for this and really been talking about life and what would happen. And just for the last 40 or 50 years, he's really been preparing us. So I feel like I can't believe this is happening and that this day is here. But anyway, this is as good as I could have imagined it going. And I sort of expect him to walk in and start giving everybody hugs. And I also feel like he wouldn't just walk in, he would ride in on a camel or a circus elephant, with a 4th of July sparkler in one hand and a camcorder in the other hand. And anyway, so his spirit is with us. My dad was very close to the loss of a lot of loved ones in his life. He lost his firstborn, Mara, to Tay-Sachs disease as a small child. And his dear brother, Alan, who in middle age left us too early, and I'm so happy that his family is here and his daughters. Leon, his dad, came to live with him in his guest house in the end of his life as well. And then, of course, Cindy, who would have lived into the triple digits, and she died too early, and he was around all of that. And I just would have expected him to get depressed or low, but he didn't. He loved life more than anyone I've ever met. He just loved life. He loved the world. And just every experience he had in the world, right? Not just the faraway locales that you might see in, adventure magazines, but just small adventures in his hometown of Ojai. He was just entertained and invigorated by small outings, small moments. He would go into town to pick up a newspaper and, stop off at the attitude adjustment store and pick up stamps. And while he was there, he would, eat an ice cream sandwich and bump into former patients and Rotary members and Montessori teachers and just strangers and just loved talking and experiencing every little thing. And of course, there were the bigger adventures as well. He traveled around the world after high school. He went with a buddy and went all the way around the world. And he continued with good friends in this room, like John Taft, who's up here. They saw the Mekong Delta and the Galapagos Islands and multiple trips to Africa. And he went to Patagonia with Tamara and so many other trips. And in fact, even after he started to decline, he still went on trips that would be epic trips for any of us. And he went with his Parkinson's and rode on the back of motorcycles all over New Zealand. And he took me to Cambodia on a riverboat and visited London. So this was, him, just his spirit, just willing him to experience life. And of course, if you were ever fortunate enough to be on one of these trips, or spend a weekend with him, or do absolutely nothing, he would find the story in that, and he would film every moment of it. And the day you got home, there would be somehow in your mailbox already a DVD with his scribbled Sharpie notes on it of what each episode was. And I don't know how he did this so quickly, but I do know how he did it. He would film every episode. He loved documenting and capturing these shared experiences, but he had in his brain the whole narrative, and he would film it in order and somehow end up with an edited masterpiece that was not edited. It was just filmed, and he had a sense of how long each scene should be and which scenes should follow other scenes. And he just had a real gift for visuals and for storytelling. And I think we've all probably experienced that from him in one way or another. Growing up, I had so many adventures in Ojai. I spent my weekdays in LA, but my sisters and I would come up a few weekends a month and get to spend time with Dad and Cindy. And as the earliest riser of the bunch, I often had a lot of solo time with Dad. We would go for walks around the East End and talk about, whether God existed, or what happens when you die, or how high the water level was in Lake Casitas and other exciting things like that. We would play tennis and we would play chess, and he always beat me. He seemed to be good at everything. So I was always just impressed by that. And of course, there was the Walnut Ranch up in the Upper Ojai that he bought and had a great time with. It was there I really got to experience, country living a little bit in a way that felt like the total absence of any laws. Both federal and state laws did not exist on Walnut Creek Ranch. I would tool around in the Chevy Blazer when I was probably 13 years old, and get put on horses and have to ride bareback with no instruction at all. Play in the mud, try to ride bicycles through mud and tip over, and they wouldn't let me back in the car until they fire hosed me off. Josh and I would roll around in giant metal barrels. There were protrusions sticking out with tetanus on them, and we would just roll around like hamsters, and then Dad would pick us up in the tractor jaws and deposit us on a hill of dirt and that sort of thing. So I don't even know if he had a license to operate a tractor. I don't know if you need that, but we didn't ask. We just had a great time, and he just provided this whole experience for us, and that was his way. It's true, he didn't always follow the rules. He would park wherever he thought a logical spot would be. He would he would totally disregard a no photography allowed sign. But what I take from all of this, and what I so appreciated about him, is he didn't sweat the small stuff. He didn't care if you made a mistake, or ate too many cookies, or crashed the car. Not that that's something I did, but I feel like if I had done that, he would get a kick out of it. That's just the way he was. But his priorities were on the important things. He was passionate about making the world better, and I know that sounds like a platitude, but it was really true. He worked to eradicate polio and support the arts, support young composers, and support other scientific research. He loved Ojai. He loved trying to help the town and come up with creative ways to make deals and help people and help the organizations and institutions. He felt a calling to make beautiful things and whimsical things. He could sit at the piano and just pull melodies out from decades ago and just play big chunky chords and melodies and beautiful playing by ear. But he would also turn his hedges into families of buffaloes and paint rocks and find odd curios and fossils in roadside roadside antique shops, and just loved to display things and talk about things and show them off. So in a few moments, the grandkids are going to all come up and read some of Papa's stories, because he loved to tell stories, and he also loved to write them down. And we just thought it would be a fun way to share those. And maybe you've heard some of these told by him himself, and maybe some of them are new. So I hope that's enjoyable. I just wanted to share one last thing, which is an email he sent about the Ojai Music Festival, which is a gathering that happens here every June, and he loved to attend, and I loved to come down when I could and attend with him. And he just delighted in the way it brought the town together, and the way the music world would all, from the whole world would have their eyes on Ojai, which was, a little town. And I mean, now people have heard of it a little bit, but he just loved that it put Ojai at the front of this scene for just a weekend. And the music was often beautiful, and often it was kind of wacky and subversive, and he loved that. He loved, in his mischievous way, he loved when audiences would be befuddled by hearing these odd concerts and musicians banging on car parts and sirens in the trees and all of this stuff. He loved it. So that was really something I shared with him that I'm so happy that I had. But this email he sent a few years ago, it's called, he wrote the subject line is Rundown Battery. Rundown Battery. And these are his words. I'm struck by a memory of an eclectic Ojai Music Festival night event in Libby Park. 60 vintage metronomes had been refurbished, charged, and placed surrounding the 300-person audience, who sat in the dark, wrapped in blankets. All the pendula of the old musical timers were released simultaneously, and loud ticking poured like a wave from bushes and shadows. It sounded like background noise when the radio was on a blank spot on the dial. But as the batteries ran down, you could distinguish clicks. They filled the night like tiny crispy stars. Then there were ticks of different rates, and some seemed to get softer as they slowed. Then there were only 3, looping like night birds. 2, like the tortoise and the hare, and finally 1, which ticked, and ticked, and then stopped. The audience sat in silence. Minutes passed with no clapping or people leaving. They may have been hoping that the clicks could return.
The musical intro. I appreciate it. I'm Amalia, daughter of David, and I'm going to read a piece called A Short Piano Piece. At the beginning of my sophomore year at Princeton, this is not me, this is Papa Rick, there was a bicker, a selection of candidates for the 24 or so fraternities. 4 of us spent 2 days in the rooms of seniors, nibbling on pistachio nuts and waiting for delegations of fraternity interviewers. Closer? There was an upright piano in one of the rooms, and I thought perhaps the current tenants wouldn't take it when they graduated. The piano could be mine for $100, they told me. But I had a condition. The piano had to be delivered to my room in Edwards Hall. No problem, said the owner. We have football players here. We will move it now. So 3 big guys pushed the instrument to the stairs, and the biggest guy went first, backing down a step at a time as the big box advanced. This is really heavy, he said. He was sweating and panting. I can't hold it, he exclaimed. He jumped out of the way and watched the piano slide. It picked up speed, then slammed into the concrete floor below. Every note sounded at the same time. The hallway vibrated for a long moment as the seniors surveyed the scene. I broke the stunned silence. Well, I am not going to pay for anything for that pile of crap, I said. And that was that.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This next one that I'm going to read is pretty short. It's a piece that Rick, we called him Papa Rick, wrote for, I believe it was the short story contest. There was a word limit, so it had to be 80 words. And this story actually won the contest. So this is this, and again, of course, it's in his voice. Uncle Meyer was talking to my deceased father as I entered the mortuary. 40 years sharing our blessings and woes, he blurted, eyes tearing. Leon, listen, I cheated you. Shame on me. Miscalculating golf scores, fudging the gin rummy totals, slipping aces into my poker hand. But I will redeem myself by putting $1,000 into your fancy, showy coffin. Uncle Meyer, I exclaimed, are you really burying that much cash? Well, not exactly, he paused. I'm writing him a check. Thank you.
Hello. So this is going to be a story about his first driving test and that experience. My mother was really tired of driving me places. So eager was my mother to get me to be independent, she scheduled my driving test 2 weeks after my 16th birthday. She promised to teach me to drive, but she never did. When my test day came, we drove our red and white Bonneville convertible to the Mount Vernon Department of Motor Vehicles. My mother told the examiner that she wanted to ride in the car while I took the test. He said no, but my mother, the youngest of 7 Uzlans, insisted she be allowed, and by God, she wasn't going to be left alone on the street where no one knew what could have happened to her. So in we all climbed with my mother sitting in the back, and I got to the first intersection and stopped. Looking both ways, slowly and carefully, I noted a car coming, but in my opinion, I thought we could make it across. On the other hand, my mother had her own opinion. She screamed, "Watch out!" and curled up behind the examiner's seat. I crossed that intersection and then I pulled off to the side. I think the examiner was sorry for me. He looked at the still cowering lady and said, "There is to be no coaching." I looked at my mother and said sternly, "No coaching."
So this story is entitled Rick Meets Dick, From a Travel to Hungary. Hungary, 1963. My first wife, Barbara's grandmother, Omi, lived in Budapest, as did Barbara's aunt Guido and her husband George, and their grown children, Julika and Marika. I went to the hospital to visit Julika's husband, Yanchi, a hand surgeon. I walked to a certain nearby intersection and waited for the girls who were coming from the hairdresser. A black limo pulled up, and Richard Nixon got out. I recognized him by his distinctive nose. I introduced myself and said I was visiting family. "Yes," he said, "that is a good way to get to know the family." He spoke loudly and kept looking over my head as though there was a listening crowd. He told me that flowers had been put in his room, showing that the people of this country loved him. Nobody else came by, so he gave me a memorized prayer in Hungarian with his hands on my shoulders, said goodbye, and drove away. As the limo turned the corner, the tiny putt-putt gray Trabant with the girls appeared. When I told my hosts about my meeting, they were shocked and fearful. You've been seen in public with a fallen political person. You will be reported to the government and bring danger to this house. You must leave at once. I was banished to a room in a modest hotel.
Hello everyone, my name is Riley and I am Miley's youngest daughter. This is Papa's story of meeting his commanding officer. I had worked for 3 months at Schofield Barracks, taking care of the soldiers in my battalion clinic when I got a message to come see, for the first time, my commanding officer, a major. My attitudes towards the Army was like that of Elliot Gould and MASH. We put up with the Army rules and did our job, but with passive aggression, cynicism, and humor. So when the request came to come upstairs to meet the major, I said to tell him I had more patients to see and would come after sick call. His response was to write a note that he wanted to see me now. There was a front office with a large Hawaiian sergeant who greeted me with his prediction that the officer would cut off your legs for my insolence. I went to the major's office, found him pacing around the room. He stared at me. First of all, why are you wearing a tan uniform when everyone else in the battalion wears green? I answered that I was currently assigned to the post headquarters medical clinic and I was dressed there. Wearing green would stand out. The major stopped pacing, pointed a finger at me. Secondly, why have you not come to battalion assembly each Monday morning at 6:30 on parade grounds? I live in Ewa Beach, an hour's drive to the base. To be on the field at 6:30 would mean getting up around 4:30. My workday lasts till 5 p.m., and I sometimes see as many as 40 children a day. I'm afraid of being tired and prone to errors, as I evaluate even the general's children. The major was deflated, and in a weary voice had one last issue with me. He asked me, why don't you at least get a haircut like everyone else in our battalion? I stared at him for a moment, brought my hand up to my forehead, and slowly peeled back the toupee I had bought at the Hawaii State Fair. If I have this cut, it won't grow back. With that, I left, leaving the major and his aide speechless. I did not hear from him for months.
Hi, I'm Emma, I'm Miley's middle daughter. This is called Riding a Horse in Egypt. Near the pyramids was a rent-a-horse place that appealed to me. The proprietor of the little operation agreed to dress me in Arab garb and would take a picture of me. I mounted and started to pose for the picture. The horse started walking, and I must have kicked him because he started to run. Then he was galloping. I held on as best as I could as he raced into the desert. The owner was screaming at me, but I couldn't slow down. Then the owner jumped on another horse and chased me. I thought if I leaned to one side, I could jostle the horse into a large circle and get back to the starting point. But he decided to run up this humongous dune, and when he got to the peak, he stopped, panting. The photograph didn't come out. It just showed my head and a lot of sky. It is an example of how broadening travel can be.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm Miley's son. This is first time going to a prom. I got a call from my friend Bob Croyan in New Jersey. He had broken up with his longtime girlfriend and he felt badly. She had no date for the Teaneck High School prom. Would I take her as a blind date? In the attic was a tuxedo I could wear, although it needed alteration. It was my grandfather Morse Gould's and was a retro treasure with its double vest and fancy pockets and large buttons. Grandpa was 6 feet tall and I was 5'7", so I had to hike it up tight to my crotch so my feet could protrude from the pants. I got the cummerbund to hide the high waist, which was reaching my armpits. At my date's home, the girl's father thanked me and gave me $20 to cover my gas and my efforts. He and her mother took photographs and helped her out the front door, but she slipped on the top stair and bounced down the stairs on her backside. The parents dragged her back up and did a fast dress repair job. I produced the fancy flower I had brought for her dress, but I had kept it in the freezer thinking to preserve it. So it was sort of bedraggled, a good match for my date.
Hi,
I'm Kate. What's so fantastic about all of these stories is that they're so Papa Rick. They are such as humor, and anytime he told a story, there was always a punchline. There was always something to see that was good in the story, no matter how scary it sounded to us or crazy. So it's fantastic to hear these. Mine is called Bringing a Kitty to Ojai. My buddy John Taft and I hatched the idea to make a video that would be used to encourage people to start their own foundations, as I had done to create the Gould Family Foundation and John the Conservation Endowment. Our video would show examples of inspiring projects. Our first subject was a social worker who used her new foundation to partner with the Navajo people to create a model modern veterinary clinic. John assembled a team to produce the video. We flew to Shiprock, New Mexico, and went to a studio in the morning. After interviewing Our Lady, we went to the sad, muddy yard where ownerless dogs and cats were waiting for execution. She impressed us with her spontaneous action to have her assistant gather up a dog and prepare it to come back home with her to Massachusetts. This led to Joe and Leslie Sohm agreeing to bring back a cat to Ojai. There was no time for the shots and paperwork, but we stopped at a variety store and got a gym bag to carry the orange-tinted feline. There were no x-rays of hand luggage, so we were all on the plane in good shape. But the cat used her paws to unzip the bag. She was loose in the cabin on the Southwest Airlines jet plane. Then, by bad luck, the stewardess stepped on her in the aisle and was pretty upset when the kitten let out a yelp. While the flustered hostess hurried forward to consult with her coworker, Joe caught the cat and hid it. When the stewardess came back, she searched Joe and then Peter and then Leslie, but everyone had a blank face. We passed the animal to one another like we were the Harlem Globetrotters at an exhibition game. I was the last one to get Kitty before we landed. I put her in my shirt and buttoned up. She was moving around in there, but I held my Wall Street Journal in front of me and had my most innocent face on as I passed two frowning stewardesses and a police officer at the door of the plane. We never finished the video, but the cat had a nice life in Ojai.
Fellows met out in the street yesterday. One was shabbily clad and he cried to avoid the well-dressed one who held out his hand. Are you going to cut me? He cried. Was they too jolly shabby to give me a call? But you'll shake hands with me, I suppose. Come and dine with me just as you are, I don't mind, but I don't judge a man by his clothes. All around any old time and make yourself at home. Put your feet on the mantel shelf. Open the cupboard and help yourself. I don't care if your friends have left you all alone. Rich or poor, knock at the door and make yourself at home. Call around any old time and make yourself at home. Put your feet on the mantel shelf. Open the cupboard and help yourself. I don't care if your friends have left you all alone. Rich or poor, knock at the door and make yourself at home.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamara. I'm Rick's daughter. And I don't know if you could hear the words in the slideshow because it was kind of quiet. The words are on the program, but it's what we used to call the Gould family anthem. And it's put your feet on the mantel shelf, open the cupboards, and help yourself. We don't care if your friends have left you home and all alone. Rich or poor, open the door and make yourself at home. And as I hear those words, I can just picture Grandma Millie, my dad's beloved mother, belting out that song, and just think about how true they are for my father's life philosophy. All of us here know how much my dad loved life. He loved life with every cell of his body. He took so much pleasure in the world, in the act of creating photographs, video, music, but also just creating things happening, right? David did some really good examples, but he was always cooking up ideas, whimsical inspirations for this beloved town. The Children's House, Taft Gardens, Rotary, the Ojai Music Festival, the Wine Festival. I honestly could go on and on. He loved this town, and he loved all of us so much. I am forever blessed by the love of my father. He has been my champion forever. He's always believed in me, and he's always challenged me to help this troubled world. And I hope all of his grandkids know that he expects no less from each of them. I have so many memories and experiences with my father. It's hard to pick what to tell you guys about. Just traveling together. We went to West Africa. We danced with the Tuaregs in the desert. We rode camels with our cameras like hanging off our necks, and we bargained terribly at the markets. We overpaid for everything. He was so open to the world, and his love of adventure was contagious. When I told him I was traveling pregnant to Afghanistan with my new husband at that time, my husband who was new to that time, to make a documentary film after 9/11, he calmly responded, "That sounds like a great idea. What could go wrong?" The gift of an optimist as a father is unquantifiable. I don't want to focus on my dad's illness because the Parkinson's took enough. It took enough from him and it took enough from us. But his grace and his refusal to let his limitations define him are something that I will lean on in my own life as a lesson in the art of being alive. He passed away the day after the presidential election, and it gives me comfort to know that he doesn't know its outcome. This is not the place for politics, but I will say that my dad's open-mindedness and generous heart, his fundamentally accepting nature, and his belief that all lives matter are good reminders of a better way forward for our world. I think of him every day, and I want to leave you with a few words of advice that I think will endure for all of us. One, just live fully and see the best in people and see the best in the world. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. And always, if anybody here knows my dad, it's always, always eat dessert first.
Eat dessert first.
And now I want to invite you all, and there's no pressure, and if it's silent and you want to just take a minute to really think of my dad and what you loved about my dad, please do. But for those who want to share in the room, we're going to open up this time for some shared reflections. And I want to invite first Ken Cantor, my father's first cousin, who's traveled to be with us. And Ken, let me bring you up to share some of your stories. And if you would like to come up, I think just make a line here, and there's empty seats here, and just be in position to come up. All right, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. So among all the people here, I think there are just 2 or 3 of us that have known Rick from the very beginning. And what I think was the second slide that was shown, 2 maybe 1-year-olds, and that was the 2 of us. One on a tricycle and the other sitting there in a sailor suit or something. At any rate, I've known Rick for a long time. We were quite close together from the ages of 5 or 6 till maybe our early teenage years. And I just have a few anecdotes that echo many of the things that you've heard about him so far today. First of all, we are cousins through our mothers, who are sisters in a family of 7 siblings. Their name was Uslin, and if there's any, you come across any Uslin there in the country, they're probably related to us in one way or another. So the first little anecdote comes from when we were probably 5 years old. I was sleeping over their house on Foster Parkway, and it was a Sunday morning. Billy and Leon, Rick's folks, were still in bed sleeping. It was a snowy day, it was in the winter, and Rick had a great idea for an adventure. We would put on our snowsuits and open the door and go outside with no adults, and maybe even cross the street. And for me, that was opening the door to something that was maybe bigger than that, because I was pretty protected, and it was an adventure. Funny that is one of my first memories of him. I'll go to a few things that happened at Robin Hill Day Camp. Robin Hill Day Camp was a camp, in fact, that owed its existence to Rick's grandfather, Morse Gould, who provided the financing for the camp after another relative who had funds was not quite so generous. Morse was extremely generous and provided the funds for the financing for the camp. So one thing about Rick, he was a great swimmer, especially an underwater swimmer. To swim our Robin Hill pool, it was a 60-foot long pool. Underwater, you became a shark. That wasn't good enough for Rick. He swam it twice underwater and became a barracuda. So then he and I, when we were a bit younger, when the camp was first starting, it was in North Yonkers. People think of Yonkers as a terrible city and so on. It was rural. North Yonkers was rural. And it was a time not too long after World War II when there was a major amount of construction going on, and there was a big development in back of the camp, surrounding the camp. And we would wander up there for adventure, and we found mountains of rubble. These were trees. It was heavily forested before that. There were mountains of fallen trees and so on. They had piled up. This was a great fort. Now, our parents never knew anything about this, but we found interstices and holes and places to go underneath all this rubble, which I'm sure was quite dangerous. Had they known, in fact, I don't think anybody knew about this until now. But we escaped with everything, and we visited these places a few times and had a lot of fun up there. Oh yeah, then we had a great adventure when we were probably about 10 or 11 years old. We both had bicycles, and we decided to go on an adventure. We went up to Westchester County Airport, which now welcomes a few large airlines. At that time, it was just a private, very small airport, but with a lot of wealth around, and so there were a lot of Cessnas and Piper Cubs landing all the time. We rode our bicycles up to Westchester County Airport, and it looked like it would be fun just to go to the end of the runway and stand on the edge of the runway as these planes were landing. Not at the very end, of course, under the flight path, but on the side a little bit. But we were having fun, and a few of those pilots were shaking their fists at us. We held our ground for a while until the fellow who was in charge of the airport came out with his pickup truck and gave us a good tongue lashing, put our bicycles in the back of the truck, and told us to get out of there. Didn't call our parents, thank God. We were in good shape. A little later on, both Rick and I got our radio amateur licenses. One of the photographs you saw here was he was sitting at my radio station. He was K2IKH. I was K2HMK. So I went, I had skipped a year in high school and graduated a year before Rick. I went to Princeton, didn't work out for me very well. I stayed there I left on good terms, but I stayed 2 years. I was not very happy there. Rick followed in my footsteps, came the next year, and he told me not so long ago that he applied only to one school, and that was to Princeton. And I don't know, luckily, but he had good grades and was a smart guy. He got in and went there, and he stuck it out for the four years. In later years, as adults, we had a few travels together. We rafted down the Colorado River, and two with David. David was, how old were you, 10 or 11 or so?
Sure, yeah, 10 or 11.
Yeah, and again, maybe the next year in Down East Maine, we spent about a week together and rode around in a car, which was, what did they call it? It was this cheap rental car company, Rent-A-Wreck, that was it. Rent-A-Wreck, and we just had fun. Oh, one of the adventures there, there's a beautiful little town called Castine, Maine, and we went down to the pier. Now, Rick and I had owned jointly a small sailboat on Long Island Sound in our juniors, seniors in high school. So we were experienced sailors. And we convinced the owner of a small day sailor in Castine that we were quite competent and could handle anything on the seas. And we paid him some bucks and took his day sailor out for the afternoon and returned it in fine feather. So I think we were quite lucky actually. We didn't have a chart. It was clear where we could go and where we couldn't, but as some of you know, in Maine, the underwater terrain is not as kind as it is where we live now around Chesapeake Bay. So, and the last thing I think I'll mention in terms of adventure was the last backpacking trip that I've been on, and I think for Rick too. This was before his diagnosis. It couldn't have been more than a year before or two before his Parkinson's was diagnosed. I came to Ojai and we drove up to, I think it's Thomas Edison Lake, some of you may be familiar with it, and went into the backcountry and stayed there for 2 or 3 nights. It was quite a wonderful adventure. So Rick was full of life, full of adventure, full of experimenting with everything, and I will miss him greatly.
Thank you so much, Ken, for sharing and putting a lot of detail on our dad's early life. I see Barbara Bowman, come on up.
Hi, everybody. I have a lot of my history with Rick. Living here in Ojai, I went through several phases of my own life with his life. But I tell you, he was an interesting cat, he really was. And he was an interesting cat to know because you never knew what you were going to get. And I will just kind of go towards the last, but I remember something Leslie Clark always told me that her mother-in-law told her, the only thing in life that you have control over is your attitude. And I have thought about that statement with reference to Rick over and over and over again, because it was the most remarkable attitude of anybody. And so whenever I have been where I think, there's a lot of obstacles or problems, I think of Rick, and somehow it changes, because I realize I don't ever remember a day with that man when he was down, depressed, upset, ever. And going back to his last phase of his life, which was so fascinating, he turned his last house into an art installation. Yes. I mean, literally, the entire house was an art installation, from inside to outside. And as you went, you got new installations constantly. It was either every rock that he had found loose in Ojai was hand painted. And he brought all the grandkids in to paint them, right? And so they were painted. And I think the last thing I saw was the installation where he had things hanging from the trees. It was just remarkable. No, the last one was the entire inside was papered with photographs from the bedrooms forward.
And the furniture.
And the furniture. I've never seen anything. It was totally, if you kept the house, you could have had tours. It was Rick Gould's art installation. Anyway, it was delightful knowing him and the pleasure of knowing all of the family. And the children, to watch them grow up and all become amazing human beings, has been my thrill and excitement. And he is my kind of thermometer for attitude. I just think of Rick and my attitude improves.
Thank you, Barbara. Do I see Vicki coming up? All right. Excellent. Vicki Midgley, first teacher at the Ojai Montessori School, where my sister and I think, were the first two students. So, Vicki, first only two students at the beginning.
I think there were 5, and my son was one of them. And the 3 children, that made 4. We didn't have much room for many more. We're still in existence 50 years later, and that's thanks to Rick Gould and Barbara, who started the school in 1973. We just had our 50th anniversary. Wow. And Rick, I can't say more than what they've already said, except that he supported us. He came regularly, he talked with us, he gave money to us, but he also gave advice. And as a staff, there are several of them here. They were so delighted to see him. He always brought his humor, and he brought his goodwill for us. So thank you, Rick.
Hi, I'm Joe, and first of all, I'm here speaking on behalf of my wife Leslie and I, and John Taft, to say that story about the cat is 95% correct. The cat did move to Ojai, and whatever was said about the Globetrotters was exactly what happened, because my memory on the airplane was, I've never seen anything be passed from A to B to C to D to E, and the stewardess was irate. She was looking, where's the cat? Where's the cat? And like, no matter who you looked at, it was over there. It was the Globetrotters. So I didn't have the opportunity of knowing Rick earlier in life. As a doctor, I mean, many of you saw him, and that's a whole nother world. And Leslie and I are kind of latecomers to Ojai. It's now 30 years, and everybody still has been here 30 years longer than we have. So I got to know Rick via my good friend and our good friend John Taft. And when I met John, you didn't meet John for very long without meeting Rick. And I thought they were kind of like the Abbott and Costello of Ojai. And John always had an adventure, and if he didn't, Rick did. But mostly John had these faraway places. So he had this big idea that we would go to Antarctica. And that sounded pretty far away for me, and it didn't take much to persuade me to do that. So Rick, John, and I went to Antarctica. It was a long ways away, long ways away. And but John said, don't worry, I will take care of all the hospitalities and the hotels. He didn't say pay for it, but he said, I've got something really nice. Okay, so we finally make it to Miami. We missed the flight out of LAX. John, Rick, and Joe are flying from LAX to Miami to go to Buenos Aires. We missed the first flight, and we were at the airport 5 hours before the flight. Missed it. Had to stay there overnight in Los Angeles to go there. So we make it to Buenos Aires, one of the things, I went up on a rooftop with Rick. Rick went right with me. And then later I had the idea of flying over Patagonia, the mountains. Rick chimed in and we split it 50-50 and flew over the most exotic mountains I ever saw. But the two things that I remember especially from this was, first of all, that hotel room that John got on the ship, or it's not a hotel room. It was actually 10 feet by 10 feet. It was 100 square feet. Rick, John, and I had to cross Magellan Pass together, living that way. And the first thing I knew about Rick was he developed, he never slept. I would wake up at 10 in the night. I would wake up at 12 at night. I'd wake up at 3. I'd wake up at 5. And John and I noticed he did not sleep. We have no example why he was still living. And because this went on for days and days. So, you know, John took up so much room because he's so tall. I mean, his head was hitting Rick's feet, and Rick's feet were hitting my head. But the only thing that kept us apart was the laptop. That was the other thing about Rick, is he was an adapter to technology. I've never seen anybody that was more than 50 that understood technology as well as Rick, and that was part of his amazing brain. So we were stuck in this 10-foot room. We went from Ushuaia, where all the hippies go to meet the penguins, to go to Antarctica. We get to Antarctica, and Argentina, we're in Tierra del Fuego, and we're high on this mountain, so high we're above timberline. There's no trees, and we find this spot. There's, you know, I mean, it looked like you're at the end of the earth, and I guess technically we were. And we're walking around, and there were these huge bones. This is not where cattle died or anything. I mean, these were huge bones, and they were in the middle of the ground. John was over there. He had his camera. Rick had his camera. Boy, believe it or not, I had no camera. And so I just looked at the bone, and I said, this place looks surreal. And the thing about Rick was, it didn't have to be his idea. It could be your idea or your idea. He would just roll with it. So I told Rick, I said, I got an idea, Rick. And I said, this reminds me of 2001 when the gorillas came out and they saw the bone and they went around in a circle and they swung it and threw it up and we saw that incredible pyramid thing on the planet. So Rick goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So John became the cameraman and Rick became a gorilla at the beginning of time. And this video exists. It may be in that computer, but he walked up and he started going like this. And he started going around the bone. And then I think we talked John into shooting this in slow motion. So Rick picked up the bone and just like in 2001, started to swing it around and around and then threw it. I think he threw out his back. And he threw the bone and John was shooting the whole thing. And we got it on one take. So that's my memory of Rick.
Thank you, Joe. Michael?
Wow. Tough act to follow, folks, I must say. What I have to share, my name is Michael Oleg. I'm Rick's brother-in-law. And what I have to share is a lot more homespun than some exotic trip to Antarctica. I just wanted to share it, though, just as an example of, as you all know, how in the moment Rick could be and how he's always coming up with ideas, whether they're crazy, whether they're rational, whatever. He would get these ideas and then try to follow through with them. And he could get some other people to follow through with them as well. This is a story that took place, a few decades ago. It's when Miley and David and all the kids were a little bit younger. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, a place that was called the Gould Ranch. So very humble area, very humble place. And so we got it in our heads one year to have Rick Cindy, and everybody all have Christmas in Flagstaff, Arizona at the Goat Ranch. And I can't remember whether they flew in or they rented a car or something. Anyway, there was a big hullabaloo because this was Christmas time, and all the kids were very excited about going skiing. There's a ski resort just north of Flagstaff, and so they were all coming with their ski gear and everything ready to go skiing. Well, they got there, and everybody was ready except there was no snow. It was a year that had snowed some, but not enough for the ski area to open. So we're kind of all scratching our heads and going, oh, well, now what do we do? Well, we managed to put a bunch of sleds and toboggans and things in the back of this SUV, and we drove up on the north side of the mountain. We found a Forest Service road that had snow on it, and a hill. And so we spent the afternoon having a great time, just sliding down this side of this hill and yelling and screaming where that's the only snow we could find we could do this in. So that all went well. We got back, and among other things, I have and still have a very old Volkswagen bus. And Flagstaff is 7,000 feet elevation, so it's home to lots of different critters, deer, elk, coyotes, mountain lions, et cetera, et cetera. And on one of my ventures around the area in the forest there, I had found where, and elk, every year they lose their racks, their antlers, their horns. So I had found a pair of those, and they were probably 4 feet long or so. There were two of them, and I thought, wow, this is great. So I brought them back, and they were just kind of sitting around on my porch, and Rick saw those, and he goes, wow, where'd you get those? And I go, well, you know, I just found them out there. He's just looking at these elk antlers, and then he looks over at my Volkswagen bus, and he goes, wow, that would look really great. We could put them in the front, the top of your VW bus. You could ride around town with elk antlers coming out of the top of your Volkswagen bus. And I kind of scratched my head, and I go, okay, well, I'm not sure exactly how we do this, but it kind of appealed to me too. I thought, wow, that might be kind of cool. Definitely had to get everybody's attention, you know. And so we spent the afternoon trying to figure out how to get these elk antlers to stick out on the front of the roof of my VW bus. And we were taping them on and all kinds of different things on how to keep them on, et cetera, et cetera. We worked on all afternoon. It came dinner time, and they all had to leave the next morning. So we never did really solve the problem. But he would ask me every once in a while afterward, "Did you figure out how to get this antlers on the on the top of your bus?" I said, "No, Rick. I'm still working on it. I'll let you know when it happens."
All right, we have time for one final comment, and then we'll move over to Sheila.
Hi, my name is Amy Gaskin, and I was so fortunate when I moved to Los Angeles in 1990 to meet Rick and Cindy just a few years later when I became involved with the Ojai Music Festival. And the first few years of knowing Rick, I was absolutely blown away by the way he not only would be on the board for the festival and support them, but he was always there rolling up his sleeves, helping out. And he was always forward-looking. And I watched over the years him build so many things in Ojai that I now, when I drive through town, could maybe take for granted. But they're here because he was here and because he had the vision. And I look at the way I personally was so blessed to know Rick. And I think about, when somebody's not here anymore, what is left of them? And I can say for myself that Rick always believed in me. He always saw the best in me. He always saw the best in everybody. And even times when he didn't think something that was happening was right, he would find something. He would say, well, they're going to learn, or they're going to figure it out, Or did you hear we've almost gotten rid of polio? I mean, he could bounce from one subject to the next with so much knowledge. And I had become very ill in the early 90s with MS and a stroke. And about a year later, Rick was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so we shared this strange parallel lives, even though we were quite different in age. We compared notes about strange neurology visits, or sometimes it would be, I'm painting rocks at the house, do you want to come up? And I just loved the way he had this joie de vivre, this just absolute love of life, which his children, Tamara, Miley, and David, and all of his grandchildren have so eloquently put. For me, Rick was there when I decided to retrain and go into business school. He wrote my letters of recommendation, and I remember specifically an interview, I hadn't seen the letter, but with the French business school, where it turns out, unbeknownst to me, Rick had written the story of the French orchestra at the Ojai Music Festival deciding not to play a concert and going on strike in the middle of the night. And the role that we had in that, in bringing them back to play. Or his story about Michael Tilson Thomas and how Michael Tilson Thomas was not going to keep conducting. You probably know the story better than I do, Tamara, because there were mosquitoes. So Rick went to Rains and he couldn't get the bug spray, but he filled up this sprayer thing, probably, I guess, was it with water? It was with water. And he went around diligently spraying around conductor Michael Tilson Thomas so that he would feel he could keep conducting. But that was Rick, because he did the same thing with his life and with his illness. He patched it up, he kept going, and he kept moving forward. And so for me, he always believed in me. When I later changed to become a photographer, Rick was the first person to get behind that. And I remember so many times, John and Melody, when he would take me, when you were often in Montana, to your gardens. I was a photo student, and we would go driving up to the gardens, and he would show me all of the incredible rare cactuses. And I don't know if he really knew where they were from, but he was very convincing. And I did believe him that they were rare. But it was him always believing, and always believing that he could make the world a better place, and just to have somebody believe in me. I didn't have family when I moved out here. I didn't know anybody, but it was Rick and Cindy who were at my graduation. And I will always, always treasure just the wonderful spirit that was Rick. And I'd like to think that some of that's going to live in each one of us. It certainly will with me. Much love.
Linda, one more, and then one more, and then you guys, then we'll be close.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda. I was Rick's assistant for several years, and I helped with his caregiving, along with my daughter, Christina. Christina, come over here. And it's been an honor to have been able to help you with your dad and your papa. He was just an amazing person to be with. And for me, I was blessed because I got to have my visits with him on a daily basis and to be able to hang out with my best friend. That was really amazing for me. We shared many adventures together. He was loving, caring. He was like a father figure to me. And he just guided me through life, took me under his wings, and just did a lot.
I had the privilege and honor to help him with his scrapbooks. And I got to learn so much about all of you. And these beautiful little memories that would pop up that were so fun and whimsical. He taught me how to be really in the moment. Because I tend to be shy and an introvert and kind of sitting in the corner observing. And with him in my life, I felt like he taught me how to step forward into life and to be present in that way. And one time we were talking, and we were talking about stuffies. And I said, I still sleep with a little stuffed animal. And he's like, well, I don't remember having a stuffed animal to sleep with. So he loved buffaloes. He had shaped his bushes into buffaloes. So I bought him his first stuffy. And at night, when it was me tucking him in, he would ask for me to tuck him in with his little buffalo. And that buffalo has made its way back to me, and I have it in memory of him. And he also, when we were going through his stuff or being creative, he gave me this flannel that he used to like to wear. It was too big. He said, here, take this, do something with it. And I said, okay. Well, it was one of the last photos in your video that he's wearing this flannel. And I got this inspiration right there, and it was probably him telling me, make them some little teddy bears out of this. So I want to make that into some little teddy bears for all of you. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I want to say, before our final comment, I just want to say a word of gratitude to Linda. For me, my brother, and my sister, you made my father's last few years in Ojai possible for him to stay here in this community that he loved so much. And you've done so much for our father and for our family, and for all of the food today. But just a huge thank you to you. It's been a pleasure.
Hi, I'm Joel Framson. I hope you can hear me. I was in one of those slides. I actually saw myself. Okay, let's hold it up. You got the message. So, the year was 1971. Like everywhere else, we were slowly moving out of the 60s. Except I don't think anyone had told Ojai that was happening. There was still only one traffic light in Ojai, right on Signal Street. Ann Framson and I spent 5 months in a Volkswagen camper crisscrossing the United States until fate and serendipity landed us in Ojai. We didn't know anyone, but that changed when Ann bought and ran the only health food store in town, which was on Signal Street along the side of the arcade. That was Solar Winds, if anybody was here long enough to remember that. Then, as sort of hippie celebrities in town, we got invited to a party, a Halloween party, I believe it was. Enter Ricky and Barbara. Figuring we had finally met another Jewish couple, we quickly made friends. The funniest part of the night was when we needled Ricky, who didn't appear to be wearing a Halloween costume. What he was dressed up as was just a normal person. The needling went on for a couple of minutes as this young man with a full head of hair searched for an answer. Then, abruptly, with great fanfare, he reached up to his full head of hair and proceeded to pull off his toupee. Everyone gasped to see our new friend with the bald head, but soon everyone was toasting Ricky and his costume. That was the start of a great friendship that was even more special when we bought a house a couple of blocks away from his and Barbara's. We had kids at the same time as they did. Miley, Tamara, and David became very close to our Celia and Jessica. There were many other tender moments, but I've hogged the microphone too long, and I'll give it up here. And just wanted to say, Ricky, we love you, and it was great memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you all. Thank you all for sharing your stories and your light. My dad would love this so much. I hope he is loving it right now. I want to bring up Sheila Cohen to lead us in a prayer. Sheila.
I'm here representing the Jewish community of Ojai. There are some other people here also, including our president and her husband. I really had the privilege of taking cookies to Rick when he was in assisted living. And today I found out that I wasn't the only one. I'm going to read a short poem, which I really, really love. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. In our religion, it's customary to recite the Kaddish. The Kaddish is a very ancient prayer from about 1300, I believe, and it's actually in Aramaic, not in Hebrew, as one would expect. And then the other unexpected thing about it is that it's a prayer of praise of God, not a prayer of dying. And so what we do is for 11 months after someone passes away, we say this prayer in their honor, and then yearly, on the anniversary of the passing, we also say it. For those of you who know it, please join me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divrach birutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon, u'v'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv, v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach la'olam u'mei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yithalei v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata ta'amiram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen.
1, 2, 3, 4. All around, take your time, make yourself at home. Put your feet on the mantel shelf, open the cupboard and help yourself. I know you care if your friends have left you all alone. Rich or poor, knock at the door and make